Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Good to see everybody today. It's a beautiful day and grateful for the wonderful weather outside and grateful to see all of you here this morning. We are thrilled about the change in season. I've been promised that that was fifth winter and that it is officially over. You know my saying that Ohio has 5 winters, and I have good sources that have told me fifth winter has just concluded and that we can finally start looking forward to spring. I'm a little questioning that. We're not sure exactly where we are on that belief process, but nonetheless, beautiful day, grateful for it. Join me, if you would, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, where we're going to begin this morning. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. In this class, we've been working our way through the book of 1 Thessalonians verse by verse, and we find ourselves today beginning a new chapter, chapter 3. And as you're turning to that, let me ask you to be thinking about something. What are the hardships of life that one should just expect? I want you to imagine for a moment that you have the opportunity to speak to maybe, let's say, a class of 10th graders in high school. And your job in this opportunity of speaking to them is to share as an adult, someone who has traversed the paths of life for a few years now, to share with them a challenge that they should go ahead and ready themselves to face. A challenge that they know, that you are sure they will face. Yes, Jen?
The unexpected.
The unexpected. Expect the unexpected. I think that generally speaking, that is true for all of us, isn't it? Indeed. What is a challenge that we should tell people to prepare for? Getting old? Yeah, and I like that. Maybe. You know, the funny thing about that, Joe, is that's a challenge that we want to welcome, isn't it? That is a challenge. That is a hardship. I'm feeling a bit of that today. I had the granddaughters over yesterday, and this morning I got up and I was just getting out of bed and thinking, it shouldn't be. And then I got to thinking about yesterday, and, 55-year-old body is not made for trampoline anymore. And I don't know how many times I got off of and down to and off of the ground over the course of 4 or 5 hours yesterday. Getting older is something we should prepare ourselves for. It is a challenge, and yet it is the kind of challenge we want, because as we all know, the alternative, not quite as good. What's a challenge that we should be preparing young people to face as they get older? Yeah, Mary Ellen. Oh, that's a big one. That's a big one. I think one of the really big lessons that I would want to impress upon a young person growing up is just go ahead and expect the reality that there will be challenging times financially. There will be hard times financially. I am a big believer, and I think you are as well, that the challenges in life that we can expect, we should expect. And not only should we expect them, we should be preparing for them. Because I'm a believer that the challenges in life that we don't look for, plan for, anticipate, prepare for, are the ones most likely to smack us in the face. They're the ones most likely to give us a problem. And everybody has that challenge and a series of challenges. I remember, Mary Ellen, speaking of what you discussed there, I remember when I got my first job right out of college. Sue and I had been married for a bit. We were looking to, start our family. I got my first job out of college, and my thought was, I've arrived. Here we are. Sue had a good job. I had a good job. I'm like, man, I'm seeing numbers on these, contracts that we signed on these jobs thinking, we are so set. And then like 6 weeks later, I'm going, what happened? What life hit me in the face. And it was tough, it was hard. It was hard. I was made aware of this not too long ago. He's not here, so I can talk about him. My big little, Norman, played his first year of football last year. Had never played tackle football before. And he's a big, strong kid, and he was anticipating how good he was going to do, and he was quite full of vigor and trash talk until the first practice. And after the first practice, I said, how'd he go? They hit me hard. They hit me hard, Dad. I'm like, buddy, you knew what football was, right? Yeah, but I didn't know they were going to hit me that hard. And I said to him, just wait, it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. I remember Bishop, the first year he was in ministry, calling me when it became tax season, going, Dad, what in the world is this about? Everybody has those challenges that you know, at least if you're wise, you know they're coming. And it's wise to anticipate. It's wise to plan for them. A challenge that we can see coming, that we can prepare ourselves for, that we can anticipate, that we can put a plan together, that we can say, when this happens, and it's going to happen, when this happens, these are the steps I'm going to take. This is the way I'm going to handle it. This is the hardship coming. Here's the way I'm going to respond to it. And I think that is such an important part, anticipating and planning for hardships. Joe, you were going to say. Oh, yeah. $4,200 a year. That, Joe, that's you wouldn't be able to buy McDonald's for a month on that today. That's a different. Well, I'm like that. I looked at my first teaching job out of college. I think I made $17,000, and I thought this is a windfall. And now looking back on it, it wouldn't pay rent. It's just it's a remarkable thing. In the story we're going to be looking at today, in the passage, it's not a story, in the chapter we're going to be looking at today, one of the things that Paul wants to make sure that his audience recognizes is there will be challenges coming. There will be challenges coming, and the best thing you can do, these young Christians, the best thing they could do is go into it with their eyes wide open, with a full awareness of what's coming down the road, and prepare themselves. This is not a passage of pessimism. This is not a passage of the sky is falling. This is not a passage of all is lost and everything's terrible. It is a passage of great realism. Challenges will come. So the question is, how can we prepare ourselves for them? How can we start getting ready for the challenges that'll be coming in this next chapter of our life, this next stage in our life, as we're moving into this next aspect of what's ahead of us. Beginning in chapter 3, 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. Therefore, when we could no longer stand it, we thought it was better to be left alone in Athens. And we sent Timothy, our brother and God's co-worker in the gospel of Christ, to strengthen and encourage you concerning your faith, so that no one will be shaken by these afflictions. For you yourselves know that we were appointed to this. In fact, when we were with you, we told you in advance that we were going to experience affliction. And as you know, it happened. For this reason, when I could no longer stand it, I also sent him to find out about your faith, fearing that the tempter had tempted you and that our labor might be for nothing. In these opening 5 verses, there are several different phrases in which Paul encapsulates this idea of a coming affliction that was predicted. He said, when we were with you, we told you affliction was going to come. We told you hard times were ahead. And in doing so, he prepared them for that. Now he's far away. He understands and hears about the affliction that they're facing. And he's conflicted himself. How are they doing? How are they making it? I know it's hard for them. How is their spirit? How is their heart? How are they doing as a people? And so when he couldn't stand it any longer, he sent Timothy to go and find out. A couple of things in this as we kind of walk through and unpack this. It said that he sent Timothy. In fact, the way he says it first is interestingly, he said in verse 1, we thought it better to be left alone. We thought it better to be left alone. What he's saying is that we, myself and Silas, thought it would be better for us to not have Timothy so that you could have Timothy. So they sent Timothy to find out. Paul probably would have rather gone himself. Paul would have probably rather seen with his own eyes and heard with his own ears how the church at Thessalonica was doing. But the work he was involved in was too important right then. And so he did the next best thing. He sent his trusted companion, he sent his fellow worker, and incidentally, as we already talked about, someone that they already knew. They were well acquainted with Timothy. They loved Timothy. And so he was sending a friend to them, sending a friend to them that could find out how they were doing and encourage them and report back to Paul about the work there and how their spirit was holding up in their time of hardship. It says there that he sent Timothy and he was alone in Athens. This is something that I think we often overlook the importance of as we study Paul. Sometimes we get the picture of Paul as being this incredible, larger-than-life, just stronger than humanly possible person who nothing affects, who's never bothered by setback, who faces every persecution with aplomb and with great spirit, who doesn't need anybody. Most of the time when we talk about Paul and his missionary journeys, maybe you don't do this, but I tend to picture him by himself. And that's not true. He had a group of companions. He had friends with him. He had co-workers that he traveled with. It is significant that Paul says, it cost me something to send Timothy to you. Here's the point that I want to make. Even Paul needed the encouragement of his co-workers. Even Paul, who was so incredibly strong and resilient and resourceful and faithful and someone we hold up as just this incredible pillar of strength. There is no shame in recognizing the need that we have for other people. There is a reason that God put His family together in a family. There is a reason that the congregations are meant to be places of fellowship and mutual encouragement and support for one another, because we need that. If Paul needed that, how much more do I need that? How much more do you need that? And the reality is that when we separate ourselves from the support of the family, when we don't tap into, we don't connect with the brothers and sisters in Christ, we're cutting ourselves off from an incredible strength, an incredible resource, a gift from God. Paul said, it cost me something to send Timothy. I depend on Timothy. I rely on Timothy. I get strength from Timothy, but it was more important for me to do without him briefly so that you could be benefited. Here's the question. If you were sent somewhere for a period of time, would it cost this congregation for you to be absent? Would there be people who would say, you know, when they were sent on that, I have a neighbor who I like very much, a great neighbor, and I'm very blessed to have such wonderful neighbors. For a long, long time, he was spending 6 months at a time in Mexico with his job. And we knew he would be gone for long stretches of time. Now he's retired and he's gone for even longer stretches of time to his home in Florida, which I'm also jealous of and tell him so regularly when it's 30 degrees and he'll text me the temperature there, and I'll text him back something that's not very polite. If you were to be sent away with your job for 6 months, would this church feel a profound sense of loss because of the encouragement and the support and the work and the strength that you provide this family? I would like to think that each and every one of you could say yes to that. When Timothy left, he left a void. If something were to take you briefly away or permanently away from this family, it should leave a void, because each one of us has a responsibility to contribute meaningfully to the whole. One more thing about Timothy here before we get on to another topic, and that is the fact that depending on your translation, my translation as I read it to you said, Timothy, our brother and God's co-worker in the gospel of Christ. It's probable that in many of your translations it will say, our brother and minister of God. Brother and minister. Brother and minister, or brother and God's co-worker. What's interesting to me about that word minister there is it is not the word necessarily that you might particularly ascribe to that. In our modern connotation, we think of minister as being like an official title. That I am blessed to be the minister of this congregation, or one of the ministers, or the preaching minister of this congregation. And today we've kind of taken that word and we've turned it into a job title. And so if you were to be talking to someone out on the street and they were to say, who's the minister at your church, you would probably give a name. When in reality, this word is not intended to be a title, especially not in this particular form. The word here, minister, and typically the word translated minister throughout the Bible, is not specifically about a job title. Instead, it's a very, very specific word that the people of that language would have understood in a very low and humble term. It meant a table waiter. In fact, as you set up the hierarchy of servants in a regular home, an upper class home in those days, you had the servant who was the family manager, and they were like the uppermost servant. They were the servant over all the other servants. And then in descending order, you had the servants that were responsible for the business, the servants that were responsible for the children, the servants that were responsible for the household, the servants that were responsible for the agricultural industry, whatever the farming that. It all was down in this descending order until the very lowest servant. The very lowest servant was the table waiter. And literally it was the person who washed your feet when you came in. It was the person who poured your drink at the table, who put your plate down, who picked your plate up. That was the lowest possible rung of servanthood. And that is what Paul calls Timothy. Paul says he was a servant of the lowest order. What's interesting to me is how we have taken that term, and I'm not saying that it's improper. The fact that we use the term minister today is fine and good. Languages change. I recognize that. Words that mean one thing today mean something else down the road. But I think sometimes we've missed the real heart of that, because we have removed from this word the responsibility that you and I share to this word. What we've done is we've said, minister, we have one or two or three or whatever your church happens to have, and they are the ones responsible for these tasks. But that's not the Bible's pattern. That's not what the early church really believed. That's not what Scripture teaches. Because what Scripture teaches is that every single person who's a member of Christ's family is a servant. Every single person who's a member of the church is a minister. Every single person has that responsibility. In fact, when Paul later on would kind of summarize the entire purpose of the church in terms of what does the church do for the members of the church. Now, the church first and foremost exists to seek and save the lost. Jesus came, that was his mission. He gave that mission to the church. The church continues to seek and save the lost. But when talking about how the church works within the church, Paul says this to the church at Ephesus in chapter 4. He talks about saints being equipped for the work of ministry. That's what we're here to do. When you talk about what does church offer for the Christians, the church offers for the Christians the opportunity to grow in our capacity to serve. That's why we're here. What is that word? Minister. What he's saying literally is the reason the church exists is to grow up all of us as ministers. Timothy was a servant. He was esteemed. He was respected. He had, particular status. But at heart, he was a servant. And there is no distinction in the church family between the servanthood that you exist and the servanthood that anybody else exhibits. And all of us are called to be servants. It raises a question. How are we doing in that regard? And this is a question for introspection. It's not a discussion. It's just something to be thinking about. Can it be said of you, can it be said of me that my capacity to serve today in 2025 is greater than my capacity to serve was in 2020? Bad example. None of us had a lot of capacity to serve in 2020. We were holed up underneath little caves. In 2022, did we have an increase in our capacity to serve in these last few years? Because if we have looked at our lives and we say, I can see ways that I'm serving, I found capacity to serve, I found skills and abilities that I can employ, I found encouragement to serve in ways that I never did before, then we are fulfilling what Paul says is the purpose of the church for the Christians. If we can't say that, we need to ask some hard questions. Is it because the environment in which I'm a part is not encouraging that? Or is it that the environment of which I'm a part is encouraging it and I'm not accepting it? If you and I look in the mirror and say, I am no better for service today than I was 5 years ago, then we really have to ask questions about the effectiveness of the church or our effectiveness within the church. Timothy was a servant. He wasn't held up as somebody great and high and noble to be appreciated. He was held up as someone who was humble, hardworking, and made a difference. And you and I need to step boldly into the realm of being a minister, being a servant, accepting that responsibility. One person famously said, "You are what you do." You are what you do. I have some problems with that. I don't think that is a complete statement. But in this regard, I think there is some truth to it. When you're talking about being a servant, servanthood is depicted by action. What do we do? That will determine what we are in terms of our service. A couple thoughts there. Any comments? Yes, ma'am. You are what you're called to do. I think that brings clarity to it, because I don't think God ever calls us to something that He knows we can't do. I don't think God calls us to something that we're unable to do or ill-equipped to do. And so the reality is, if God's calling us to it, then by definition we must be prepared. We must have what's necessary for it. So I think that you're right, Jen. A better statement might be, we are what we are called to do and then subsequently do. So, good point. Anything else jump to mind for that? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I think you're really right. If you couldn't hear what she was saying, she made a great point that one of the things that we are blessed with here is that we do have a congregation that is very outward focused. And it is very easy to become inward focused. It's very easy to fall into that. But just a couple of examples that she rattled off there, with the work that we're doing in the community and especially with the children in some of the neighboring communities right here around us and the good work that's going on there. The work with foster families that's taking place every month here in this building. A lot of people don't know about that. And absolutely wonderful work. Just last night, I popped into the building to get a few things done for today. Didn't expect to see anybody here. A bunch of cars in the parking lot, and I'm thinking, what's going on? I've forgotten what's going on tonight. And walked in, and the entire fellowship hall was set up absolutely gorgeous, just beautiful. Easter decorations. Tables are set with gold plates and fancy silverware and centerpieces. And I'm immediately like, of course, I'm in a panic. Like, what did I miss? Oh my goodness, there's something. And David Finn met me at the door and reminded me that last night was their big Easter banquet for the Capernaum group. If you're not familiar with this is the group of special needs students from all the Union County high schools, from North Union, Fairbanks, of course Marysville. There's 5. You guys know them better than I do. What was it? Triad, yeah, I think Triad was one of them. In any case, the 5 schools, and they had prepared a meal. I think they had like 45 people for this beautiful, gorgeous meal with activities planned. He had speakers set up, decorations. It was completely over the top. And I was like, this is the kind of thing that's going on in our building on a regular basis that a lot of us don't even know about, myself included. I forget about these things. There's so many things going on. We are very blessed to be a part of a congregation that's seeing needs out here in the community and meeting those. And it is so easy for us to move our focus off of what's going out there and focus our energies on our own, comfort, our own desires, our own play, whatever, it's very easy to do that. And I would contend, Jillian, to your point, that one of the ways we keep that focus out there is by continually growing in our own capacity to serve. If we are continually, person by person in this congregation, focused on how can I serve Christ better? How can I be a better servant for Christ today than I was a year ago? How can I grow in this? The natural expression of that is going to be finding opportunities and getting involved in opportunities to make a difference. And that's going to be outwardly focused. It sounds weird to say it this way, but by working on ourselves and our capacity to serve, we actually do keep the focus outward faced. And I think that's really important. If we don't focus on how we can continue Christ's mission to serve in a good way, that's when we fall into interior focus. And I want things to be the way I want things, and comfort and all the stuff that causes division. Yeah.
One thing with that is, you find a way to serve, you're going to be terrified for however long until you get over that.
Yeah. Jim makes the point that if you do step out in service, that there is a trepidation about that. There's a concern. Sometimes there's a little fear involved with that. And she said, you'll have that until you get over it, or you'll just have that. I mean, I think that it's very, very true. I talk to a lot of preachers. I talk to a lot of people who serve in different ways for the church. And I ask a lot of them, when did you stop getting nervous? And they'll say, I haven't. I don't. I still have that concern. And I think a certain extent of that is healthy. I really do. There should be a healthy level of seriousness, not fear that keeps us from doing it, but there should be a healthy level of I've used this example before. My big little is about to start driving. We've been practicing driving. He's actually a very, very good driver. We do it illegally, and if you ever see him behind the wheel, know that I'm there beside him, and you'll notice my eyes are this big. But he's very good. He's very good. I always stress to him that I don't ever want him to get too comfortable behind the wheel. I don't want him fearful. I don't want him getting in the wheel scared, but I want him getting behind the wheel serious. I want him to understand there should be a little bit when he buckles that belt that says, what I'm doing is serious. What I'm doing is important. What I'm doing has the capacity to, cause trouble. And I need to do it well. And I think that should be something that church service should bring about with it. There should be a sense in the heart of every teacher that stands up in every class, whether you're teaching a 3-year-old class or an adult Bible class, that should say, this is serious. Take this serious. It's important. When you go out and you serve in the community under the auspices of this church and you have capacity to make a difference, it should bring with it a sense of seriousness. Not a fear that paralyzes, but a nervousness that says, hey, pay attention. This is real stuff. Good point. Good point. All right. It goes on to say that he sent Timothy for a purpose. He sent Timothy with very specific instructions. Just as an aside, this is one of the things I love about Paul. Paul is a consummate leader. John Maxwell, who many of you know, John Maxwell is a Christian, actually Circleville, Ohio, native. He was a pastor, preacher, speaker who ended up going on to have great success in the business world as a management consultant because he applied biblical principles to business and management, and he's a great speaker. He talks a lot about Paul, and Paul is a consummate leader. And one of the things that he stresses is how incredibly good Paul is at giving concise and clear instructions to people. When Paul sent you to do something, you had no question what it was. It wasn't, hey Timothy, go back to Thessalonica and, just let me know what's going on. No. He sent Timothy with some very, very clear, very concise instructions. My translation says, he sent him, verse 2, to strengthen and encourage you concerning your faith. Some of your translations will say, and I like this better in some ways, establish you and encourage you concerning your faith. What we've got here is Paul sending him with two specific jobs. Two specific jobs. The first is to establish. That means to analyze, to look at the situation and understand the situation. Basically what Paul is saying is, Timothy, I want you to go and I want you to make sure they're on the right path. I want you to make sure they're on the right path. Establish them in the right path. And then second, once you're sure you've got that right, then encourage them, which is, get them going. Yeehaw, move down the path. Move down the path. Now, I want you to understand how important those two things are for all churches of all times, including today, and maybe especially today. When Paul was doing that, he wasn't merely setting up a one-time set of circumstances for Timothy to be successful. He was setting up a way that church leaders can identify success in their congregations. Establish and motivate. Establish and encourage. First, are we on the right path? Are we as a church, are we as a congregation of God's people on the right path? Are we putting our efforts into the right things? Are we going about things in the right way? Do we have the right heart? Do we have the right motives? If we do, then the second part of that formula is go like mad. Go. Get running. You're on the path. Keep going. Sometimes the path can get long. Sometimes the path can get tiresome. Sometimes along the path of doing the right thing in the right way, we get tired. And we need somebody to come along behind us and say, you're doing a good job, don't give up. You're doing a good job, don't give up. My son-in-law is a world-class runner. He's just ridiculously talented. Goes all around the country and competes in races, and he's just a superhuman freak. And I've been able to, on many occasions, go and see his races. And it's a remarkable thing that even he, at the incredible level that he's at, will tell me that he saw me at a certain mile marker, or he saw the family, or he heard us cheering. And I think, what an interesting thing that even he gets tired. Even he gets encouragement. He's on the right path. He just needs somebody to tell him, keep going. He needs somebody to say, you're doing a good job. You're on the right path. Keep going. Do a good job. And Paul says to Timothy, make sure they're on the right path. And then when they are on the right path, encourage them, because it can get tiring. It can be exhausting. And they need that. They need to be encouraged. They need to be strengthened. They need to be built up. Sometimes we can be on the right path, but just be standing at the starting line. And sometimes encouragement there is, get started. Yes, that's the right path. Now go do something. Yes, you have identified a good work. Go get involved in it. This is actually one of the things that I see very often. I am just all over the place today with my tangents. That's one of the things that I see very often that happens in this church, is that people will come and they'll say, you know, I thought about, it would be good if we, and I'll go, that would be great. Yes, we absolutely should do that. Somebody will say, I have an idea to, or have we ever thought about, and I'll go, no, and yes, we absolutely should. That is wonderful. Now, how can we get this going? Oh, no. And you're like, wait, no. You have got this is a great idea. This was God, putting an idea in your head. This is God dropping something in your heart. This is a great thing. You have identified a path. Let's go. Let's get started. This is a great thing. I'm beating this up, but you know where I'm going with this. Sometimes motivation is, you've got a great idea. Get started. Sometimes motivation is, you've been doing this a long time and you're tired. Don't give up. You're doing a great work. You're making a difference. Paul sent Timothy, because he understood that the church at Thessalonica may need both of those. You've got some people with great ideas who need help getting started. You've got some people who are out there working hard, and they need motivation to keep going. Sometimes we'll find ourselves in both of those situations. Sometimes we will be the ones who have been grinding away at something for a long time, and we're tired. And we need somebody to come put an arm around us and go, man, you're doing a great job. Sometimes we're standing on the precipice of an opportunity. And like Jen said, we're a little afraid. We're nervous. And we need somebody to step behind us and go, hey, you got this. You have what it takes to do this. Paul sent Timothy not so much to inspect the church at Thessalonica, but to encourage the church at Thessalonica. he said to establish. Make sure they are on the right path. But everything he had said to this point, most of the things he's going to say after, there's a few. Paul's going to identify some things like, hey, Timothy, when you're there, make sure to check this and this and this because they need some help there. But most of what they were doing was spot on. And they just needed encouragement. If Paul were sending Timothy to MCOC today, would he be sending him to inspect or encourage? Now, just like Thessalonica, there are clearly some things that we need to work on here. But would he largely be sending him from the standpoint of, they're doing some great things and they just need motivation to keep going? Or would he be sending him to say, there's a lot there they got to start over with? It's good to think about. Good to think about. In fact, verse 4, when we were with you, we told you in advance that you were going to experience affliction. And as you know, it happened. This is really the heart and soul of this particular section and where I want to spend the next 5 minutes here as we wrap this up. I told you from the beginning that expecting hardship and planning for it, preparing for it, is a big determiner in how well we will handle it. If we know a hardship is coming and if we can prepare for it, then we are better equipped to be able to deal with it. I said 5 minutes. We have 5 more minutes. And when we have that, this is an example of this. Paul said, when I was with you. Now remember, he was only with them for 3 weeks. How's that for an opening series of sermons? You're in town for 3 weeks. You get 3 weeks to do a mini-series, and one of them is hardships are coming? Really? Well, he knew what they needed, and he gave them what they needed. And he said, as far back as I was with you, as far back as when I was with you, I told you hardships are coming. One commentator suggests that he believes, this is a little dicey, he believes that it was only within a matter of months that Paul wrote this letter. I think it could have been within a year or two. Doesn't matter. It was a short time. From the time Paul was with them and said, you're going to have hardship coming, prepare yourself now, get ready for it, to the time that he wrote this letter, it had happened and it was continuing. Because it says very clearly, look in verse 4, you were going to experience affliction and it happened. So it's not that the affliction is still out there, it's on them. But Paul said, remember I told you about this. I told you this would come and I tried to help you prepare for it. Being prepared for hardship ahead of time, not being surprised, I think is one of the real keys. As a church, as a Christian, it is, I don't want to use that word. I was going to say unexcusable. That's too harsh of a word. It is small-minded for us to be caught flat-footed. The Bible makes it very clear. Jesus himself famously said, in this life you will have trouble. James, when he wrote to the early church, he said, count it all joy, brothers, when you face various trials. The Bible is very, very clear. There will be some hard days. As Christians, if we continue to be shocked by this, that's on us, y'all. That's on us. God has said, it's coming. The question is not if it's coming. The question is, are you going to be ready for it when it's here? Are we going to be ready for it? So for us to be surprised by it is really, I'll say it is inexcusable. Now that doesn't mean we're always going to anticipate every single one of the hardships or know exactly what they are. But when we face hardship, we shouldn't be going, I had no idea this was going to happen. Well, then that's on us because he says it's going to be. So the fact is that hardship has a place. It's going to happen. I would also go as far as to say hardship has a value. Hardship has a value. Now, I know that some in this church lean more towards the Calvinist view that God causes all things to happen, including hardship. Some in this church lean more toward the Arminianist view, which is we have free choice and things happen, and in the fact that we live in a fallen world, hard times are going to happen. And I don't care where you fall on that. This part is true regardless. Those hardships have the opportunity to teach us lessons that no rosy, smooth path will ever teach us. Those hardships have the opportunity to teach us lessons that nothing else but a hardship can teach us. And instead of being surprised and shocked and running from it. We need, as a congregation of God's people, to lean into these hardships and say, this is hard. I knew there would be hard times. What can I learn from this? What can be gained from this? What strengths can be honed in this? What abilities that I did not know I had, I can discover in this? What strength, what resilience can I embody in this hardship? What has this hardship brought to light? Here's a hard one, that I need to change. What has this hardship brought to light that I need to repent? What has this hardship brought to light that I need to redirect my life? Hardship, by its very nature, is never pleasant. But if we're wise, hardship will always bring about some kind of a blessing. Paul said, it's coming, be ready. When it comes, don't be shocked. And when it does come, lean on God and find how the capacity to gain, even in this difficult time, can be had. As we get into next week's lesson, we're going to move into the next verses here, 6 and following, and we're going to be looking at specifically some of these hardships and what can be gained from them, what they could gain from it, and by studying it, what can we gain from it today? Your comments today, as always, wonderful. Thank you so much. Appreciate your attendance, appreciate your attentiveness, and excited to jump into worship with you all this morning.